We will call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Election Commissioners for the City of Chicago. Good morning, my name is Marisel Hernandez. I'm the chairwoman. Seated to my right is Commissioner Kresse, to my left is Commissioner Jonathan Swain. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Any suggested changes?
Yes, Madam Chair, under item 4, approval of minutes, it should in fact show item A, minutes of the special board meeting of November 6th, but also the minutes of the canvassing board for the canvass of the returns of the November 6th, 2018 general election.
Are there any objections? Is there a motion to amend the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on the, we'll go on to the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the special board meeting minutes of November 6th, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And is there a motion to approve the canvassing board meeting minutes of November 6th, 2018?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the executive director's report. Mr. Gall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to let the board members know that we could request, people have been requesting punch numbers. We will issue those punch numbers out January 4th because we will start audio recording by January 7th. I just want the board members to be aware of that. Mr. Holliday and myself are going out to the warehouse on Friday. As you know, this is a quick turnaround time we have for this election. We spend a lot of time on these hearings, but we need to go out to the warehouse to make sure that once we get a ballot set up, we're ready to load. So we're going to meet with the warehouse people tomorrow, and we're going to go over what they need. And then there's some supplies that they still need to get, so we'll be working on that. Hopefully I want to get a ballot started printing. We're looking at having that. Hey Gary, we're looking about the 18th, right? About that. So we really have to push it, and I hope that the agendas get a little larger for this, from the hearing officers, so we get this going.
Well, as soon as they're ready, we're ready.
We understand that, Madam Chair. I'm
Ready to work.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I like to hear.
There you go.
Okay. But everything seems to be trying to fall in place, so hopefully we'll be ready. We want to talk about the first week of January, and Mr. Allen will talk to you about that, sending out our email notice to people that requested absentees in the past. Remind them about that. It's about 300,000 in the queue, and we can't mail all 300,000 at once. It'll take about 10 days to get those out. I'd like to start that right after the first of the year. And I think everything else is falling into place after Wednesday, January 2nd, after the Electoral Board. We should have something that we can start working, actually laying out ballots. Now, for this first go-round, it looks like if we can get the top of the tickets finished, we can release 25 boards. With releasing those 25 boards, I need the board members to think, do you want to mail those out, or do we want to mail them all out at the same time as all 50 boards are ready? That's something that we need the board members to think about. Because it will have an impact. Okay. And that's all I have for my board. We're still working on that. We met with 2FM about some of our polling places. We've also met with 2FM about our early voting sites. There will be a couple that are changed, so we're working on that now. Hopefully I should have a list for you to look at on the second also. Election judges seem to be going well right now. I'm very happy with that. And the coordinators, those two are going very well. Good.
Has everybody brought up the issue of the student judges and a possible possible conflict on either the date of the general election or with the ACT tests or
I haven't received anything, right, I've heard about it, but I haven't received it.
there, on one of those, I'm not sure if it's the general municipal or the.
Probably
The April election,
April,
that's where the usually in April.
Okay.
I'll tell you right now. ACT testing is happening April 2nd, is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And it just so happened that one of the, I met one of the students and he happened to mention that he would be able to be present for that election. So,
The election code does allow for us to give a student a pass on give an excused absence on a test.
They're not allowed to be marked absent that day, but getting the passes for the ACT.
okay,
We will look into that.
okay, thank you. Mr. Holliday?
Good morning, Madam Chair
Good morning.
and fellow commissioners. As of this morning, we have 27 rec examinations to start, 20 single objections, 5 have double objections, and 2 possible restarts. The judges of election training will begin February 2nd, 2019 for those judges who missed training and for new judges, as well as the election coordinators. Presently, our IT department is backing up the files from the November election. The employees from the registration department that are not on record examination, they're keeping the regular day-to-day work moving and being processed.
The judge of election training, where will that be taking place?
well, we use block 37.
Okay. So
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Holliday. Mr. Allen?
So, real quick, Mr. Allen, to go back, the SAT test dates are March 9th and May 4th, 2019. So that does not conflict. And the ACT test dates are February 9th and April 13th. So those two are not conflict. There may be some other tests. I know sometimes they require subject matter tests.
Right.
That might conflict, so that may be something, but in terms of the large test, doesn't seem like it.
Good. Excellent.
Mr. Allen?
Good morning, Commissioners. Most of our activities involve keeping up to date the website and responding to media calls related to Electoral Board cases. We also have a news release that we prepared regarding the very likely delay of early voting, not delay, but this new law that created 40 days early voting for a municipal election. This is the first time it's affecting a municipal election, and it's quite difficult to meet that. The traditional period has been 15 to 22 days before Election Day, so we're advising people that we'll have the traditional 15-day period in all the wards, but the very super early voting, if you will, at 175 West Washington and only 175 West Washington may be delayed because before we do that we have to publish legal notices, perform pre-election logic and accuracy testing, make sure that the audio ballot and in all languages as well as the visual ballot in all languages is ready to go for early voting. So even at that one site, it's very unlikely we'll be done, we'll be ready to go on January 17th. We ran into the same issue in the March 2016 and March 2018 primary. There doesn't seem to be the stomach in the legislature to acknowledge this mistake and this cut and paste error and to remedy it. Because the optics to them is that this is reducing early voting, and no one wants to be the sponsor of that bill. So I don't know if that that this will be fixed, but 40 days before April 2, like we've mentioned before, is February 21. So I don't know. We all know that's impossible, so.
Will this require a court order?
No, it won't. We've, in the past, Lance has administratively, along with other jurisdictions in northern Illinois, have explained that, without a ballot, you can't start voting. And that's very likely to be the case on January 17th.
Can you run back very quickly, going to the awards, what date can you expect that to be open?
The traditional period will be on time, February 11. We anticipate absolutely no problems with opening up 15 days before Election Day. And it might be a struggle depending on any kind of tight contests for 15 days before April 2. We'll see how that goes. So, but for this election, very definitely.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is old business, infrastructure projects and changes in election administration and voting equipment. We will be tackling after this election. Electronic poll books, any news on that? Okay. And legislation, Mr. Lasker.
Not much yet. We're starting to take a look at bills to watch as the new session is starting. No apparent carryovers from the last session, and we're also trying to find time to get started with pushing our own legislative agenda, and reaching out to people who can support that.
We will now proceed to new business. We have a 2019 calendar of board meetings, and that is in your binder. Any questions? Seems like it's the same one, continuing. Is there a motion to approve?
So.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the calendar is approved. Next item is a board action pursuant to 10 ILCS 5/10-8 and section 500-11 of the board's general rules of administration to determine whether the following nominating papers and petitions for candidates in the February 26, 2019 municipal and aldermanic elections are in apparent conformity with mandatory provisions of the Illinois Election Code. And this is Sandra Mallory as a candidate for the office of mayor of the city of Chicago. And that, is there anyone here on that particular case? There is no one. And Mr. Lasker.
For the office of mayor, a candidate needs to submit at least 12,500 valid signatures. The election code requires that petitions be securely bound at the time of filing. Therefore, when our staff receives petitions, they take each securely bound set of petitions and do a review to find out if there's enough signatures. Sandra L. Mallory submitted a packet of petitions that was securely bound at the top. It's been undone for scanning purposes. Nicely spiral bound on the top with a nice cover on the front and back. This contains 100 sheets of petitions with 20 signature lines each. So the maximum amount of signatures that could be in here is 2,000. This particular set includes actually 1,918 signatures. There were 9 additional sets of petitions that she filed, all of which were nicely spiral securely bound at the top, but individually of each other. And because the election code requires the petitions to be securely bound, the staff reviews them, and each has to be treated as a separate individual packet. Our electoral board has previously, in several cases, ruled that when a candidate files nomination papers in multiple packets, it does not invalidate the nomination papers, but you can only use one of those sets to consider that the petition is valid because of the binding requirement. And so there actually was one case that we've had where a candidate submitted multiple packets and still got on the ballot because one of those packets did have enough signatures. so it wasn't invalidated, it just had enough signatures. Here, unfortunately, none of the packets that she filed has more than 100 sheets in it. None of them could possibly have more than 2,000 signatures for an office requiring 12,500.
Any further questions?
Just for the record, the logic behind the binding, clearly these have been unbound for scanning purposes. I presume when the law was written, you didn't have scanners. I'm sure we were doing copying and things of that nature. What's the logic behind it? The law is clear in my mind, but just for the record, what's the logic behind the binding?
And the logic has been spoken to, or the legislative intent behind the law has been spoken to in prior published court decisions, that being to avoid tampering, to protect the integrity of the electoral process, to know that at the time those petition sheets are filed, no one can slip sheets out, add sheets in, and that's what the courts have found is to be the legislative intent behind the law. It is, of course, a restriction. It's a restriction on your right to run for office, and so therefore courts can review as to whether it's an overly strict restriction. They've said it's not overly burdensome. Even though, as we've seen, candidates this cycle have filed 60,000 signatures on petitions stacks this tall that are securely bound in one volume. They'll put metal poles through it and everything. We've seen referendum petitions with some 80,000 signatures, literally 3 feet of papers securely bound into one stack, and is to protect against the integrity of election process.
Right, Counsel, as I understand, this was really legislation, is an anti-fraud legislation, because there have been some cases where somebody would file petitions with insufficient petition signatures and then request to review them, and in doing so would slip in some additional. So that's why the requirement that when you do the initial filing, they all have to be there, they all have to be found together.
And prior to our staff disassembling the binding, before they do that, they mark down how many page numbers, what's the highest page number in there, so we know how many sheets should be there, and then it's only taken apart at the time that it's then put through the scanner to make the copies of it.
Plus they photograph
And they photograph at the time.
before it's taken apart.
Are there any further questions, comments? If not, is there a motion to find out the petition of Sandra L. Mallory, the mayor of the city of Chicago, is not in conformity with the mandatory provisions of the Illinois election code?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is a hearing of a request for reconsideration of the board's prior apparent conformity action involving 2 sets of referendum petitions in relation to establishing a greater Austin Health District in certain territory within the city of Chicago. Is there anybody here for that?
Yes, Pericles Abbasi on behalf of the proponents, Congressman Danny K. Davis.
Yes, Mr. Alonso.
So I guess it's a little similar to the previous one, but so what in the board's previous action, it was described as 2 sets of filings, 2 sets of petitions being filed, when in fact what did happen was it was one petition that was filed. There was one proponent statement. They were filed concurrently. They said that the issue was it was filed in 2 volumes. I don't know if do you have them here?
Yes.
Yeah, just gonna demonstrate.
So
Whether it's good for me or not.
Yeah.
These were securely bound at the time of filing, taken apart for scanning purposes. These had the 2-hole metal prongs at the top. Ironically called a binding referendum. One packet contains sheet numbers 1 through 91. And this second packet, which was securely bound individually, does have sheet numbers 92 through 232.
Okay, so I think it's, the fact that it was turned in together, there was one proponent statement, the first volume ends at 91, the second one ends at 92. I think it's clear that Congressman Davis intended to file it as one petition. So then the question is, and together each, I think the two petitions, that one of them has 1,800 something, the other has 1,300 something. So together they have 3,100 something, so they're over the 2,800. The issue is basically the binding, and Mr. Lasker had sent me the Rule 500.11, or .11, the apparent conformity rules. And in the rules, there's, it basically lays out what the apparent conformity rules are for referenda in Part 3. And it's, it has to have the minimum number of signatures, it has to describe the territory, describe the question, and have a circulator affidavit at the bottom. But it doesn't say anything about making a determination about the binding here. Because we have the case Briscoe v. Cusper, where basically states that this board, or any electoral board, presumably in the Seventh Circuit, can't create new rules without, giving notice of it. And in the apparent conformity rules of the board, or the Board of Commissioners, it doesn't say anything about the manner of binding. Now, what the law says is it's got to be in book form, securely fastened along one edge. And this is in book form, granted it's in 2 books, but they're securely fastened along one edge. When you look at the purpose of the law, as was just discussed, it's to prevent tampering, to prevent adding sheets without, sometimes you'll see tests done where can you remove sheets without tearing them and all that, or take out the binder. And in this case, it's the case that you can't be adding sheets here. Now, I understand the precedent of the Electoral Board is to, when this happens, you consider the sheet that's most favorable to the proponent or the candidate. I would argue that the precedent of the Electoral Board isn't the rules of procedure of the Board of Elections. Obviously when the Electoral Board makes a ruling on a specific case, the Board of Elections will follow that, or the State Board of Elections, whoever, if the state senator or something, they'll follow that. But the precedent of an Electoral Board, whether it's this Electoral Board or another Electoral Board regarding these candidates, isn't in and of itself binding. And there's been no appellate court decisions that have directly addressed this issue of, there have been conflicting cases on whether a paperclip's sufficient, but there's been no case on whether, someone turned in 2 volumes like this, both securely bound, is that securely fastened in book form along one edge? Seeing as there's no appellate decision to that effect, it's not in the rules of procedure, I don't see the authority, I don't see it within the board's rules to deny this petition when combined they have more than enough signatures, and it doesn't say anything here about the binding.
So the board, if it did make, the staff, if it did make any determination about the binding, it would have found that the binding was perfectly sufficient for these government petitions. Very standard 2-hole punch at the top with the metal prongs that we've seen on countless petitions, whether candidate petitions or referendum petitions. We were all kind of scratching our heads as to what happened here, because we frequently get these mental health district referenda, and they've, I believe, always made it on the ballot. This certainly is not a petition package that would have been difficult to put together the way it's supposed to be. We've recently this summer been dealing with a petition package 3 feet tall that we found in one package. The determination made by the staff was not a determination made on binding. It was a determination made on a standard procedure that petitions are required to be bound, and when we receive them, we treat them as they're bound. They're supposed to be bound in book form as these were, and then therefore they were bound individually and treated individually. I also do take issue, I see where Mr. Abbasi is looking at subsection 3 of the apparent conformity rules. Subsection 3 is specific to the referendum petitions, and in that subsection 3 it does not specifically say anything about binding, but also section 1 of the rules does say that generally authorizes the staff, the board, to determine whether the petitions filed are in apparent conformity with the applicable provisions of the election code. Of course, Article 28, the election code governing referendum petitions, does have a secure binding requirement. That's applicable provision of the election code. Paragraph 1 authorizes the board to look for any.
Can we stop for a second? Secure binding of the referendum petition, the language follows the same, is in parallel with the same language of the legislative.
Correct. There are different articles of the election code, but the language is substantively the same.
Okay.
Yes. So, I do believe that even, so for example, if a referendum petition sheet is filed and completely unbound, I would still say that under this policy, that would be a reason to find it not in apparent conformity because of section 1 that applies to both referendum, it expressly applies to both nomination papers and referendum petitions. It authorizes the board and the staff to find if they're in apparent conformity with all of the applicable provisions of the election code. Then you get down to what's more of really just a guidance for the staff as to how to proceed, and that guidance does not currently, for referendum petitions, say anything about the binding. Of course, I think subsection 1 clarifies that issue. I would also just like to point out that Mr. Abbasi has talked about precedent of the board. This board does try to follow its own precedent. This board, as we sit here right now, is not the same board that was the Electoral Board from earlier this morning. We all know that. But at the same time, we do need to think about the precedent. If we are going to allow these two separately bound referendum packages to be put together for this matter, then we have to for all future matters. And therefore, we would be throwing the entire secure binding rule out the window. I don't think that's the proper thing to do. The case law refers to apparent conformity of core powers. It says that we are the gatekeeper to the ballot. It's our duty to enforce these laws, as harsh as the results may be. When you consider the burden it puts on the petitioners, it's not so great in this situation. This summer we saw a much different situation with 3 feet tall stack. They still got it done.
And if I might add quickly, I mean, there is a safeguard, and that's the objection process. Someone could have filed an objection to this, and under the precedent of the Electoral Board, granted the decision that was made would have been made by the Electoral Board, but no one did. This referendum covers 3 wards. No legal voter in those 3 wards decided to object to it, and this isn't. I don't believe this is a clear-cut part of the law. It says securely bound along one edge in book form, or suitably and securely fastened in book form along one end, and it's in book form. Granted, it's 2 books.
You're asking us to carve out new law, aren't
No, I'm saying that if something
It hasn't been applied this way before, so you're asking us to carve out new law.
No, that was more my case earlier, but this one.
These petitions are bound on 2 edges.
Not the same image, but no, because and going back to the point of the, I think it was in the previous case, the one just before, the point of the secure fastening requirement is to prevent tampering, and that's what the appellate courts have said. The appellate courts a case has never come up before them on specifically this issue, so we have to kind of extrapolate from what they have said, and they've said the point
So
of.
yes, this way, you're asking us to interpret this law differently than we ever have in the past.
No, I think it's when there is a gray, where it's not 100% clear, the appellate court hasn't said something clear.
Right, so you want us to interpret it different way.
You rely on an objector to file an objection. When no objection's been filed, I think apparent conformity should be for, just like minimum number of signatures, and that's what the rules say. The rules lay out apparent conformity. In the event an objector did file something, then the precedent of the Electoral Board would come into play, and that would be ruled on, and this board would follow what the Electoral Board said in terms of publishing on, printing on the ballot or not. In this case, I don't think it's a clear-cut law. It's clear-cut that there has to be bound, and they have to be bound to prevent tampering. But I believe that's the case here. When there are 2 books, I guess you could add a 3rd book or something, but I don't even know if that makes sense. But it seems tamper-proof enough, and considering no one objected, I don't think the apparent conformity rules allow the decision that was made to be made.
For referendum petitions, unlike candidate petitions, there's no early start date to the circulation period. For candidate petitions, they have 90 days to circulate. For referenda, there's nothing there. So, following this argument to its logical conclusion, we now become the safety deposit box. for ongoing petitioning efforts, where a year and a half ago they come and they bring us packet number 1, 6 months later they bring us packet number 2, 6 months after that they bring us packet number 3. There's a lot of different cans of worms that get opened up. I hear Mr. Abbasi's argument. I think that really what he's sort of saying is let's let this slide this time, but we can't do it that way. We have to be consistent and uniform. We have to not care who files the petitions, what the substance of the petitions are. We just have to follow the rules.
Mr. Abbasi, this is really tearing at me because this is a great petition. I mean, we're talking about a health district, what the community needs. But somewhere along the line, someone has made this decision.
And it wasn't me, I came in like last week.
I know, and, you know, it's just so unfortunate. But I do think that we're bound by the rules, and any diversion from that could cause us serious problems in the future.
And the precedent has always been to be securely bound in one volume, and our boards have told us that we have to strictly enforce these sort of rules. So, again, it tears at me, but I think we do have to uphold the precedent. And if you want to take this up and get it changed, then we'll have a new precedent to follow. But I leave that to you.
And Mr. Abbasi, just for the future, I'd like to inform your client that there's other problems that the staff didn't address because they're not attorneys. But when I look at these petitions, that second question under the PTEL law is in vast nonconformity with PTEL statutes. It really needs to be done as a separate referendum. There's additional information that's required to be printed both on the petition and on the ballot. So that's not an issue we're actually taking action on today. But whether it's apparent conformity or not, you know, they need to comply with the unauthorized statutes. So please work with them on that for the future, because we certainly appreciate these questions going on the ballot, but it needs to be done the right way.
Is this something that could be on the ballot for the next election? Is that something?
For the runoff?
Or no,
No, no.
not the runoff.
No.
I'm talking about 2020.
220?
Yeah.
Sure.
This specifies, and both specify the next regular election 92 days, at least 92
Well,
days.
it's filing, I mean, it could, a new petition could be filed.
Oh, of course.
But,
Right.
and maybe if you can correct all of those, you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll.
And work with council as well.
You know, like the county treasurer or something might take question of the violation of PTEL laws. Even if that referendum were to pass, they might not get the money if it's not done right. So I'm just kind of worrying, like, that needs to be done right so that I can see problems that could arise.
I'll make a note.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is there a motion to deny the request for reconsideration?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Lasker, is there anything further we have to do on this?
Thank you, sir.
No.
Thank you, Mr. Abbasi. Is there a legal report?
Nothing going on in the legal department. Other than electoral board, there's not much.
Okay.
Okay.
I think you've been hearing about it.
Yep, okay, thank you. We have, we'll go on with financial reports. We have a balance sheet and voucher listing for the City of Chicago, 2018 appropriation number 18-09, dated December 27, 2018, in the amount of $1,469,848.66. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We also have a balance sheet and voucher listing for the County of Cook 2018 appropriation, number 18-09, dated December 27, 2018, in the amount of $6,527,839.74. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have public comment. We received one request for public comment Mr. Mark Lovelace from the South Side Democracy for America Election Process Report. Good morning, Mr. Lovelace, and thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's been a while since I've been before this board, but I see some things haven't changed. It's still only, the sound is still not the greatest in the world, but that's okay. You'll see you brought water only for yourself, but that's, I got my own water. I'm sure Mr. Goff could have accommodated otherwise, but chose not to. But that's all right,
You
too.
didn't ask us. If you would have asked,
Where
it
is
would
the
have been
public
accommodated.
service? Where is the service to public? But the matter which I want to talk to you guys about is one that has well, there's two parts to it. We know that this election cycle, there's more interest and participation of people. Some people who are new people to the process, who are excited or who are concerned or worried, who are coming to participate in the electoral process. And yet, even all the good efforts that we're doing meet certain challenges. And one of those challenges is the challenging period. I heard a candidate, an established candidate says, well, we're in the petitioning period of the election. And I'm just thinking, I don't recall reading in any annals of democracy a petitioning period. But it's something that I understand you need to do to safeguard the integrity of the ballot.
Is that, are you talking about the time with which to file a petition, the 90-day period? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the challenging period.
Oh, the challenges.
Yeah, the challenges. Because the concern is that it is, unfortunately, it seems that it has become a norm, a staple now in the 20 or 25 years I've been around here, that there is this whole, that there's a challenging period, that's a part of the campaign. Instead of getting the word out, those who are operatives, who have the means and the ability, spend an enormous amount of time even before a piece of paper has been passed to a voter or any discussion of a candidate on how to manipulate and how to take people who, or to bar or fight their opponents in this room instead of in the public square. This year, I believe I read that it's over $1 million that has been, well, I guess reading this, honestly it says 6 million, in regards to challenging. And some of the challenges are valid and some of the challenges are not valid. I think the circumstances that we have here, particularly in this election, are somewhat handicapped because the Secretary of State's office has not enacted the law that was passed for automatic voter registration. And the fact that it was supposed to go in effect earlier this year and then finally be in full effect early next year, the fact that the Secretary of State's office has not complied with the intent or the spirit of the law is an issue that this board has an opportunity to weigh in on and make a statement towards. The other thing is that I think that there is an opportunity.
You know, we had a panel, and we invited the Secretary of State's office and the State Board of Election to discuss one of the main issues, and people had I don't know if you attended, people had the opportunity to attend and ask, and there were very pointed questions towards the Secretary of State's office in that. That was in...
I want to say it was July or August, but we hosted, there were a series of public hearings on the automatic voter registration, downstate, upstate, and then ours was the most heavily attended of all of them, combined.
Mm-hmm.
And we had probably more than 80 people in attendance. We had various questions that were posed directly to the Secretary of State's office and the State Board of Elections. And we posted the video of it on our website. But We've been right in the middle of trying to push for full implementation of this.
Right, my position is that if the law had been in place, we would not have had, the challenges would not have been as robust, or, because the issue is, we know that people don't intentionally put the wrong address on, or they don't intentionally, sign petitions the wrong way, but they're putting forth a good faith effort. And the fact that these technical, is that we have found a way. I mean, Illinois is actually the only, and this was stated. I did not attend those hearings, but I did follow them, and it's still that we're at the brink of 2019, and the implementation has not happened. And I think that there just needs to be a bigger step up. And in regards, and the last thing, because I got 20 seconds, I think here, is the board may want to consider, or I would encourage the board to look at the challenges that were considered frivolous, that were a waste of time, and that the board itself enact or seek for redress from those petitioners who wasted the public's energy and time to just distract and to undermine the whole idea of democracy. I think a couple of penalties, once a couple of folks receive a couple of penalties for this sort of thing, that then it might discourage frivolous challenges, as well as considering the whole idea of that if someone turns in 1,000 signatures, whatever the requirements are, and one person can object with and that person who object, and I'll be honest, and I've done it. I know I've done it.
I was getting ready to
I know. I see.
Okay.
Don't
Right.
come for me.
Okay.
I did not.
Right.
Don't come for me. But as the whole idea around campaign finance reform comes in, I'm for campaign finance reform, publicly funded campaigns. But until then, we got to deal with what we've got to do. So I will admit, I have participated in those, in some of these too. But the very fact that we're at a new place, y'all. We got new people coming in. We want to encourage them. I have found out that it seems like the best thing to do to break the system is to participate. Because the more people that participate, the more the challenge of being accountable is there. And then, as that happens, then we have a chance to look at ourselves and be better, and to get better, and to do better. So my only point of coming was to mainly ask that the board consider being, in light of everything you have done, more aggressive in pursuit of having the Secretary of State's office to implement the law as is the will of the people, and we're the only state with a Republican governor, roll clock, right, once or twice a day. And the only Republican governor that signed automatic voter registration. We should be happy about that. That you guys consider doing something about that, as well as recovering the public money for people who, instead of supporting democracy, want to play games and undermine the whole path of civic engagement.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
sir.
Mr.
Thank you.
We have no further requests for public comment. And Mr. Lasky, is there a need for executive session today?
No.
Okay, and if not, then we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting on January 8th at 9:30 a.m. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes, we're adjourned. Thank you.